Once again, in last night's Republican presidential debate, the audience was more interesting than the candidates. This season's debate audiences have revealed more about themselves than we have ever learned from previous debate audiences. We knew that Republican voters are in favor of the death penalty. We did not know that, contrary to the Christian values that many of them espouse, they absolutely love the death penalty, just can't get enough of it.
Governor Perry, a question about Texas. Your state has executed 234 death row inmates, more than any other governor in modern times. Have you?
We also learned that some of these same people, a vocal minority, would gleefully impose the death penalty themselves on sick people if just given the chance.
Who's going to pay for if he goes into a coma, for example? Who pays for that?
In a society that you accept welfareism and socialism, he expects the government to take care of it. That's what freedom is all about, taking your own risk. This whole idea that you have to prepare and take care of everybody.
But, Congressman, are you saying the society should just let him die?
No.
At last night's debate, we learned that the flag pin wearing "We Support the Troops" crowd actually despises some of the troops, including this soldier who asked his question from Iraq.
In 2010, when I was deployed to Iraq, I had to lie about who I was because I'm a gay soldier, and I didn't want to lose my job. My question is, under one of your presidencies, do you intend to circumvent the progress that's been made for gay and lesbian soldiers in the military?
Yeah. But there is nothing this bloodthirsty, merciless mob of haters hates more than being called exactly what they are: heartless.
If you say that we should not educate children who have come into our state for no other reason than they've been brought there by no fault of their own, I don't think you have a heart. We need to be educating these children because they will become a drag on our society. I think that's what Texans wanted to do. Out of 181 members of the Texas legislature, when this issue came up, only 4 dissenting votes. This was a state issue. Texans voted on it, and I still support it greatly.
Senator Santorum.
Fox News pollster Frank Luntz, who conducted a focus group with Republican voters during the debate, said Perry's defense of the Texas DREAM Act, which allows children of illegal immigrants to pay in-state tuition rates if they graduate from a Texas high school and are accepted into a state university, provoked, quote, the most negative reaction I've seen any Republican candidate have among Republican primary voters. Only in the twilight zone that this Republican presidential politics 2011 style, only in that twilight zone could we see a man be cheered for proudly presiding over the executions of 234 people, and then see that same man booed by the same crowd, booed because that champion of death by execution called his worshipers heartless. Campaigns for presidential nominations are sometimes called fights for the soul of the Republican Party, fights for the soul of the Democratic Party. No one has used that phrase this time around for 2 reasons. First, because no candidate fits perfectly into the current shape of Republican orthodoxy. And secondly, the Republican Party of the 21st century, if we are to judge by the debate audiences, has obviously lost its soul. Joining me now, Chris Hayes, editor-at-large for The Nation and host of Up with Chris Hayes, weekend mornings here on MSNBC, and Maggie Haberman, senior writer for Politico. Thank you both for joining me tonight.
Great to be here.
Thank you.
Chris, this Twilight Zone, how can this happen? Here's their favorite killer, state-sanctioned killer up there. They boo him after he calls them heartless.
It was such a moment of cognitive dissonance. It was a moment of cognitive dissonance for a liberal such as myself watching and saying, I was tweeting Rick Perry is right on this, and not only was he right, I thought it was so interesting. He clearly chose the wrong vocabulary to defend the decision, right? First of all, the way that you defend that policy to that crowd, which is essentially indefensible in that context, is to talk in a hard-headed, practical way. I mean, he sort of got to it in the end. They're going to be a drag on our society. That's the kind of language to use. You do not defend a policy in this context by pointing to the policy's basic compassion. Because compassion, the ethos of compassion, is absolutely viewed with derision and contempt by the base right now. And I feel like the Republican base is in kind of a mean mood. And I don't know how much they're worked up because they're at this event and they're full of adrenaline, how much it represents actual substantive commitments, but they're in a mean mood, and you do not go before a crowd in a mean mood and talk to them about compassion.
I personally believe they really mean it on the death penalty. I think they really mean it on the DREAM Act and on anything involving immigration. I think a few of them got carried away on that, let the guy die in the street if he's sick and doesn't have health insurance. I don't believe that if it came to it, they would actually force that. But Maggie, you're down there in Orlando. You're at the Conservative Political Action Conference today in Orlando. Are these people as mean as they sound when they play the audience in these Republican TV shows?
No, when you were dealing with people one-on-one, certainly they are not repeating a lot of what you were hearing in these debates. However, I think that you will hear from a lot of people privately, you'll hear certainly from the campaigns privately, things like the let him die moment did not thrill anybody. Things like what you saw last night with Rick Perry, that's a bit different. I think what Chris said is exactly right, where basically you're describing something that is supposed to be a hardline issue for the Republican base right now in very compassionate, quote-unquote, weak terms. And immigration is a very, very hot-button issue here. I think it is not a huge surprise that that debate crowd reacted that way to that. I think there were other moments that were a little more shocking in some of the debates that we've seen recently, like the applause at the death penalty and so forth.
All right, let's listen to how Mitt Romney followed up on this today at the Conservative Political Action Conference in Orlando. Let's hear what he had to say.
My friend Governor Perry said that if you don't agree with his position on giving that in-state tuition to illegals, that you don't have a heart. I think if you're opposed to illegal immigration, it doesn't mean that you don't have a heart. It means that you have a heart and a brain. Legal immigration, good for America. Illegal immigration, something I will stop if I'm president.
Chris, how thrilled is Mitt Romney to find a spot to the right of Rick Perry?
It's perfect. He has his chessboard all set up, okay? He has his two rooks, and one's on the left and one's on the right. The rook on the left that he's going to come up with is Social Security. He can get to Perry's left on Social Security. He can reinforce his moderate bona fides. He can make Perry look unelectable in the general election. And on his right, he has this immigration issue, which has been dropped into his lap, and so he can attack from both sides simultaneously, and you could see the palpable delight in Mitt Romney's eyes, the savoring smile on his face as he went after Rick Perry on this issue with every buzzword, every kind of like dog whistle, illegals, $100,000, all of the kind of conjuring of liberal distributive justice that the base just loathes in that response.
All right, now let's listen to how Rick Perry picked himself back up today at the CPAC conference.
As conservatives, we know that values and vision matter. It's not who is the slickest candidate or the smoothest debater that we need to elect. We need to elect the candidate with the best record and the best vision for this country. The model for socialized medicine has already been tried, and it failed, not just in Western Europe, but in Massachusetts.
Maggie, it sounds like he had a better day at CPAC.
He's definitely had a better day. The problem for Rick Perry is more people in the Republican primary electorate will have seen the debate last night than will have seen his speech at CPAC today. And so last night's impression is going to be the one that resonates. His campaign's line is going to be to get more aggressive with Mitt Romney, try to define him better than they have, try to go after him on, as Chris said, he's attacking from the left and the right. That does invoke the problem with Mitt Romney of flip-flopping and being all things at once. You're going to see a lot more of that. Unfortunately for Rick Perry, people are just getting to know him, and the impressions from things like debates really do stick. So I'm not sure that things like saying, we're not electing the smoothest debater, we're not electing the person who communicates the best, I don't know that that's quite going to cut it.
Chris, what do you think Perry's got to do now? Because he's going to have to deal with debating. Sure, he can read a speech. His writers did a fine job for CPAC. That's not the problem. What does he do?
Well, he's got to bone up. I mean, it's hard. I mean, I now talk on television for a living.
Doesn't he have to somehow walk away from some of his past on immigration and walk away from some of his past on Social Security while pretending he's not?
Yes, he does, and he finally got the HPV answer. This was one silver lining for him. He got the HPV answer finally right after trying it 10 times last night, where he said it was about life, and I got lobbied by a young woman who had cervical cancer, and and he framed it in the terms of life. He said this is a pro-life decision, and I thought he actually did a good job with that answer. He sort of put it to bed. He's got to come up with those answers particularly for the State Dream Act, and the other thing he has to do that no one in the field has been able to do is kind of distill and make stick the anti-Romney care argument. Mm-hmm. It's been out there forever. I personally thought it would really mean the death of his candidacy. I did not think he could overcome it in the moment of the most intense hatred towards the Affordable Care Act. How could Mitt Romney distance himself from his signature policy achievement when so closely related to the president's? And somehow he's been able to, and I think it's still on the table for whoever can grab it, finding the argument that lands on
I thought the same thing. I thought that Romney care was the cancer in the Romney candidacy. I thought every one of them had something wrong with them, and Romney's was devastating. But we're out of time for this segment. Chris, what do you have coming up tomorrow morning?
Tomorrow we're going to talk to the great economist Robert Frank about taxes and inequality.
And you're going to do that at 7 a.m.
I'm going to do that at 7 a.m. I'm going to be well caffeinated for that discussion. And we're going to have Anne-Marie Slaughter, who used to run the policy planning department at the Department of State. She will be my guest as well.
Chris Hayes and Maggie Haberman, thank you both very much for joining me tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lawrence.